We've got Christopher Lee, Managing Director of EMEA at Populous, and Sanjeev Katwa, Head of Technology Solutions at Tottenham, talking about Spurs' new stadium and the issues around that. We had David Gold up on the platform yesterday. He's had none of these issues. As Steve Parish said, the government has given him a stadium. These gentlemen are building a new stadium, and I'd like to hand over to them to tell us the issues involved. So, Chris and Sanjeev.
Thank you very much. I think really what Sanjeev and I are going to talk about today is very much community. And the drivers behind the new stadium for Spurs is driven very much about community, whether that's the community of Tottenham fans, our local community within Tottenham, national and international, and really how the project on many levels works very much about creating, enhancing and growing our community. First, I think I've got a confession to make that I was also the architect behind Arsenal's stadium, Emirates down the road, so I'm in a sort of slightly difficult position of working for two incredible rivals. That said, I think the two clubs have tried to do very similar things, albeit we're now probably 17 years after we started designing the Emirates Stadium and 10 years this year since it opened. But many similar ideas ran through the two projects, creating a great home, bespoke for football for Emirates, but very much part of a regeneration in the Emirates and Lower Holloway. Thankfully, I can say the image up here is Archibald Leach, who's one of the great architects of early English football stadiums, also worked for both clubs. He masterminded the move from Plumstead for Arsenal, much to Spurs' then disdain, and then went on to build the West Stand here that you can see in Tottenham. So I think we're in a reasonably good company there working with Mr. Leach. But I think the great thing about Archibald Leach's stadiums, and he went on to deliver, I don't know if you know much about him, but a lot of the fantastic stadiums, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Villa, Fulham, fantastic, beautiful stadiums, that grew up much like White Hart Lane and evolved as the local communities evolved. Everything grew in step. The community and the clubs were very much integrated, and the clubs were very much part of the local community, the local culture, and the local identity. And that's something we're incredibly keen to enhance. And I think, 50 years later, after the sort of Leach, fantastic, lovely English stadiums, there was a big move, particularly in the States, but also through Europe, to move these facilities outside the city limits, to move them from their local communities, to push them to the outskirts. They were seen as, bad neighbours, disruptive, noisy, surround them by car parks, and produced, I think, a wholly unsatisfactory experience for both the spectators, but also a huge, gap in a lot of the community. So to take, Brooklyn Dodgers, move them across the country in America to LA, Brooklyn still has this sort of gaping hole of losing their team. And I think one of the great things, and that we're very keen to do, is keep a lot of these clubs, and Spurs particularly, in their local environment. The slide we've got up now is Camden Yards, which we designed in the early mid-90s, which was probably for us the first big move of taking a sporting facility back downtown. Baltimore at the time was downtown was somewhere you wouldn't want to have gone. There was a huge move to move the ballpark back downtown, and was one of the key pieces in the regeneration of Baltimore and the Inner Harbour. So a hugely successful piece, and that's very much what we're interested in doing with the new stadium. So the stadium itself has its own facilities around it, hotels, residential. It sits as part of a much wider master plan being developed currently by the local authority, both to the west, from the train station, which has been upgraded at White Hart Lane, through all the way to Northumberland Park to the east. So you can see that sort of swathe either side of the stadium, to create, a much closer, regenerated environment in Tottenham. And I think really the stadium is actually the catalyst for that regeneration, something we're very keen to be part of. So here you can see phase one, which is the stadium, obviously in the middle of that, but also the beginning of some residential towers, the hotel, local museum, community facilities and shops, which we'll look in a little bit more detail, some more sort of images of the stadium. The building to the left, which is Sainsbury's Supermarket, Technical College and the club's shops, have already been built, up and running and inhabited. and we're on site now, in fact, out of the ground, which is great, building the new stadium, and that's how it sort of starts looking between day and night time. I think really the key piece, I think, on a design aspect is this thing of community. Very much seeing Tottenham and this stadium as part of the local community, not just about football. So certainly on non-match day, we have a public square, which you can see here to the south of the stadium, publicly accessible, about the size of Trafalgar Square. In fact, slightly larger than Trafalgar Square. There's a comparison between the two, as a fantastic civic space that's used by locals, supporters on match day, local residents, as a public amenity. And that's one of the things we are, and the club are very keen, to create this idea that this is a civic building. It's Tottenham's civic building, that we all own it metaphorically, and it's something that is incredibly important to our local community, both football fans, so here's beginning to look at what that plaza looks like on match day, but also very importantly what it looks like and what it feels like on non-match day when we start building the residential towers, increasing the densities, and producing community facilities for the local area, and finally beginning the regeneration, or the long-mooted regeneration of Tottenham, and using the stadium and its infrastructure as the leverage for that. So a couple more pictures of how it starts looking up the high street as we move south to north, the sort of blade-like marker of the hotel, and then the integration of some of the local facilities, the retention of some of the local historic buildings, Warmington House, within a new museum and shop, an extreme sport building, which will be fantastic. I think it's the largest internal dive tank and internal climbing wall. So to start creating a sort of density in the development, so we can start getting some genuine life around the stadium and the facilities. As the stadium goes, of course I'm an architect, I'll show you some sections, I'll avoid too much detail, but an interesting and very tight stadium. We're very interested in atmosphere and this idea that how the building becomes very much a driver for atmosphere and driver for fan engagement and fan experience, which is both what Populous and the club are incredibly focused on. So, but also I think the move in the stadium thinking is really a move between saying everyone who visits the stadium, whether you're in the least expensive or the most expensive, is treated at a level as an incredibly important fan. So here's perhaps one of the club level entrances as we move from the west. On the south, which is incredibly important for us, is a huge single tier, incredibly steep stand, which makes its references back to some of the great stadiums we talked about, but equally the people who use that have a very comparable experience. So the idea of sort of sandwiching corporates, which are much derided in English football, between the genuine spectators in a stadium, is very much what we're against. This is looking at everyone as a fan, as a customer, as an owner of the building, and giving a fantastic experience through the entire stadium, whether you're in the least expensive or the most expensive seat. And part of that is very much about the seating bowl and about atmosphere within that seating bowl, and how you create this sort of careful sort of mix between both science, which is about acoustics and sight lines and reverberation times, proximity, viewing angles, and a bit of magic, and how you sort of create this incredible atmosphere. And that big home stand at the south is very much seen as the sort of engine for that seating bowl atmosphere, and we'll talk a bit later how we're going to enhance that and how we're going to use technology to be part of that experience. But certainly the references are back to identity, the great old stadiums, the single tier stands, which started off as mostly the sort of banks, the north banks or the south banks, but also looking at the famous single tier stands. There are numerous through the world. Obviously the Kop in Liverpool is probably the more famous one. Borussia Dortmund have an incredible in the yellow wall. This will be a 17,500 seat, incredibly steep, incredibly active stand, which we think is going to drive a lot of this thing about fan engagement and experience and creating this idea of community. Because I think the wonderful thing about stadiums, and the reason I love being involved in them, is that there's a rare moment that you get to be part of this community in a genuine sense. That's 60,000 people wanting something, sharing something, experiencing something. It's very rare in our lives to get that number of people with some kind of common objective And I think it's a genuinely wonderful experience. I think the other thing about the new stadium is it's very much a multi-use stadium, and we're looking at fans, not just Tottenham Hotspur Football Club fans and EPL soccer. It's a bespoke stadium for NFL, which will host a number of the exhibition games as the NFL hugely successful. So our fans are not just Tottenham, they're also NFL fans. The difference between those fans and how we design a facility, I think in the 60s and 70s, and we look back at some of those stadiums I showed earlier, were very unsuccessful in these sort of multi-use facilities. They were compromised for any sport that went in there. Everyone ended up hating them because no one got what they wanted. I think technology's moved on sufficiently that we can create the perfect technical environment for multiple use events. So certainly between soccer and American football, but other concerts, I mean, virtually any sport. But American football is one of the key drivers. So here's a view of the seating bowl in football, soccer mode, and how it transforms using sliding pitch technology, which we've done in a number of stadiums around the world, Arizona Cardinals, which we'll look in a second. But a lot of the lessons we learned through Wimbledon Centre Court roof. So these big bits of moving technology allow us, and I think if we move to the next slide, hopefully that works. That's Arizona Cardinal Stadium with the field sliding out, a different use in Arizona. A lot of it's actually rodeo driven, so they slide the field out and use it for other uses. But the Spurs Stadium will do the same thing. The grass will slide out, revealing a bespoke NFL field, which is lower down than the soccer field, obviously because of the depth of the field itself. So we get the perfect sight lines, we don't have any obstructed views, so we create an amazing stadium, both for soccer and NFL. And really, it's all about creating this incredible sense of community, both from fans, spectators, local environment, and now as we touch on things like NFL, a truly global fan base.
I think one of the things is that when you look at new stadiums and experiences, it's all about, as Chris has mentioned, the key thing is atmosphere. And what we don't want is we don't want a situation where technology actually changes the atmosphere in the bowl. I think a lot of organisations have been criticised for saying, well, you've introduced Wi-Fi or mobile technologies and the atmosphere is no longer what it should be like. The design of the stadium with sort of the steep south stand and being close to the pitch will ensure that we won't lose the atmosphere we currently have at White Hart Lane. But we can't sit still. We need to be able to do things around fan experience. And fan experience has become a real key point nowadays in the world of sport. A lot of us look at what happens in the US and the US venues. And as Chris has mentioned, the new stadium is going to be having a couple of NFL games and other events as well, where the dwell time is obviously a lot longer than your 90 minutes of football and 15 minutes of half time. An NFL game could be 5 hours and sort of time before and after. So when we looked at technology for the new stadium, we're not looking at technology after the stadium's built or after it's been designed. We've looked at technology with design. I think that's a real key thing. So we've been working with the team at Populous to ensure that technology is at the heart of what we're doing in terms of design. So we've got, and I'll use I'm not sure how many technology people in this room, but we'll talk about, we have the right number of communications rooms and data centers. We've got the right holes in the walls for the access points for Wi-Fi. We're making sure that the lighting system is great, but also about the ingress and egress for fans, how people actually come to the stadium, how they get in. We all know that in a couple of years' time, it should be the norm to get in with your mobile phone. We do that when we get on an aeroplane. How do we order food and beverage? How do we pay for things? I think quite a few of us will have Apple devices and using Apple Pay or whatever, the Android Pay devices. So we want to make sure that all the sort of experiences we actually have outside of being in a football ground or a venue can actually work for us while we're in the venue. People look at going into football clubs right now and say, nothing works, my mobile phone doesn't work, I can't do social updates. What's the Wi-Fi? No, there's no Wi-Fi here. We don't want that to be an issue for when people come to our new stadium for when we open up. So when I look at some of these things, we really want a situation where we can surprise, delight and reward our fans as well. So this is actually utilizing technology such as Wi-Fi and beacon technology and mobile infrastructure. So people are going to come in with multi-devices, not just a phone, watches and etc. And they're going to be actually rewarded for either coming in early, or they're going to have experiences where we can actually push information to fans and let them know what's going on. I've looked at technology where you can utilize mobile phones and create a fantastic wall of sound. It's a fantastic sort of technology which is already out there in the US. And our key message when we started this project with Populous was, we want to make sure that it's the world's most technically advanced stadium. And that's a bold statement when you look at what's happening in the US in terms of some of their venues and some of the new venues in Europe. But it allows us to make sure we have the infrastructure which is flexible, adaptable, scalable, and resilient to do whatever we want moving forward. We're opening up in a couple of years' time, 2018, and then afterwards, if you look at what technologies might be in 2025, for example, we want to make sure that the technology infrastructure allows us to do whatever we need to do. We're not just putting new cables in or doing anything additional to something which is actually a really beautifully designed stadium. We also look at our international fans. This is not just about, I would call it the near and here and near. This is not just people who just come in the stadium or the people who are in the close proximity to our new stadium. This is also for our international fans as well. So we're doing a lot of work in the club at the moment with regards to about international growth and how do we attract more fans, how do we have them engaged with what we're doing at White Hart Lane as well and what we do as a football club. The support of obviously the Premier League as a product is superb. They invested a lot of money obviously in football. But also, as Chris has mentioned, we're the home of NFL. So we're going to have 60,000 plus fans coming along to watch an NFL game to our stadium. How do we as an organisation make sure we're ready for that as well? So we're talking a lot about this so-called unrivaled fan experience. And this is not just in the digital side of things of what we do. This is also in the physical environment as well. So Chris showed the picture of the South Podium, where there is activation areas, there's signage, there's areas for people to come, but then also how do they engage digitally as well. So we need to have both things working, because what we can't do is say that digital is the answer to every single thing for the unrivaled fan experience. There's also the physical side of what we actually have to do as well. And that goes from, as Chris has mentioned, better transport links for people to get to White Hart Lane, and what they actually do when they actually get to our stadium early on. Obviously, we want people to come earlier. We don't want a situation where they're just turning up 5 minutes before. We'd like them to come early, to engage with us, to do things around our area, buy and monetize from them as well, obviously, but also engage with the club and create that atmosphere that we have at White Hart Lane today. Some lovely pictures of our team. We've performed really well this year. One game to go. I think we're very fortunate that we have a lot of youth in the team. It's interesting when you look at what we do and our players do on the social side as well. And the fans at White Hart Lane, there's a real connection, especially with the younger generation coming in, with the young players that we actually have in our squad. And obviously, several of them will be on at the Euros this summer. And hopefully we have a very successful season next year as well. Technology is one of those things where, when we embarked on this project, we embarked on it in a way that, as I said, looked at technology and design together. And that's what's given us the opportunity to work with the NFL as well. And as Chris showed from the sort of shot from the bowl of an NFL pitch, we're accounting also for the facilities that you need to host NFL games. So whether that's big changing rooms, I would call it, which can take up to 60 people. Mm-hmm. And obviously other areas, significant amount of press turn up for these events. The experience and expectation is a lot more for a much longer event. So this is going to be, I would say, a significant step change in what we're doing, but also what people need to see in the designs of stadia. There's been some great stadia. We've got some great stadia, obviously, in the UK already. We just feel that technology is going to really support us to create that unrivaled fan experience, but also allow us to keep the same level of atmosphere that we currently have at White Hart Lane, and also for us to do more with our customers and our fans. I think that's really important. I think I'm glad Chris mentioned the fact that we're treating, whether you're a general admission fan or a corporate fan, we're looking at them in the same way. And I think that's really important to look at it in that respect. So anything you want to add on as well, Chris? In terms of the design, I think it's unique. It's a one-off,
Yes.
which I think is really important. I think some of the designs you see in football stadiums, there's some similarities.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not only a beautiful structure, but it's a really well-functioning building for what we need as well. And it's got everything that we need to enhance our fan experience and give us that technology leapfrog that we require.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chris and Sanjeev. That was fascinating. Let's throw it open to the audience now. Anyone got any questions? Yeah, gentleman there.
Good morning. I'm Peter Raymond. I'm the course director of the European Sponsorship Association Diploma. And gentlemen, you both supported our qualification in different ways this year, so thank you. Not surprisingly, as someone who is presenting a sponsorship proposition, you know where this is going.
Yep.
And we had a brilliant session yesterday on globalisation and the effect of that on our marketplace. I'm very interested in the way you presented your stadium, in what sort of search you might be going through in terms of a naming rights partner, and indeed, is that a course that you're going down? I noticed you kind of haven't referred to that, and that may be because you're knee-deep in that probably at the moment. But I'm interested to know kind of what would be your criteria for a naming rights partner, if indeed that's the way that you're going.
Sanjeev.
Yeah, I mean, as a club, obviously, it's important to have, large brands, and brands want to be associated with our new stadium. And if you look at some of the stadium that we already have in the UK, existing venues and new venues, Emirates is a great example, the Etihad, where I used to work. They're great examples where global brands have come along and want to be associated with not only the club, but also the Premier League. Yes, we're going to be going through that process. It's going to be a process that will be managed by us internally to look at key brands, who we're looking at, markets, segments. Looking at, obviously global brands are key, but also those brands that are associated with the customers and fans that we actually have as well. I think that's really key. I mean, we don't have anybody yet, but we are talking obviously to many brands.
Gentleman there. In the middle, blue shirt.
Mouth Mins, Strive sponsorship. Obviously, a lot of considerations gone into the design of the stadium and all the facets that you mentioned. And fan engagement seems to be very much at the heart of what you've done. Obviously, a lot of that's from the view of the club. I'd be interested to know how much engagement you've had with your current partners or potential future partners, both from a capability perspective of what they can provide, but also things that they may want, whether that be things that they can see in the future from an activation point of view, or challenges they currently have in the way that they leverage their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, obviously we do, a lot of fan insight. We didn't just start this process of designing a stadium without insight from our fans.
How did you approach the fans? How did you
get
their input?
This process has actually been going on for several years. I mean,
Yeah.
Chris, you could probably...
8 years now.
Yeah, so it's a long time, and it's not just fan insight as to what are we putting in the new stadium, but even to the level of what do we want to see for food and beverage, for example, and what do fans see as the biggest obstacle to get to the stadium, etc., etc. So that's really key. I think going back to brands, partners, whatever, we're obviously in a procurement process at the moment. We're heavily engaged as part of one of the things that I do, along with a team of people that I work with. We've engaged with many companies. We listen a lot. A lot of companies have approached us about solutions that they already have. But I think we're pushing things to another level. We're really challenging them to say, what's going to be there in 2 years' time, and where do you see your roadmaps going for, say, 5 years? Tell us what the technologies and solutions we need for the future. It's probably easier for us to look at what there is already out there, because we can go to venues, we experience these things ourselves, but what's coming up? So there's some really innovative companies out there who are very keen to engage with us. And we're going through, I say, a selection process based on capabilities, how we can bring them into the design of what we're doing. A lot of companies that we've spoken, there's a couple here today, they've been very excited by what they've seen. They like the fact that technology is at the heart of the design of this new stadium because it makes their job a lot easier as well.
Is that simply in terms of things like they do at the Allianz of changing the colours and that kind of thing?
Things like that. I mean, obviously those sort of, I would say those sort of experiences, we work very closely with Populous on those sort of things, whether it's, what's it going to look like outside, because obviously there's some design challenges as well. And Tom's across some of that sort of stuff. But we're also looking at the experience inside as well. So a lot of stadiums, and there's been some press recently about, Wi-Fi. It's very easy to say, well, we'll just put Wi-Fi in a stadium. Well, you can't just put Wi-Fi in a stadium. It has to be a specific type of Wi-Fi to allow you to give everybody the opportunity to be connected and allow you to do things which allow you to stream, what's going on. Because remember, it's a multi-use venue, so we might have some rights restrictions around, say, football, but for the NFL, it might be very different. So we need to accommodate for all those sort of things. And then you look at the other side, where you might have a concert with 70,000 people in there, because obviously you use the space on the floor as well. And a whole bunch of kids turn up, and they're just social tweeting and streaming and doing whatever they do. So we need the ability to use technology to not only be very open, but also be very closed as well. And I think that flexibility is really, really key to what we do, and choosing the right partners to work with on that. So they're all aware of this, and we've had some really, I would say, creative workshops with a lot of these people.
I hope you've got Wi-Fi in the press box. Anyone else? Yeah, gentleman in the middle there.
Thank you, Simon from Replicom. I'm interested in your view of the future. It sounds a bit of a big one, doesn't it? But technology in the 3-year time frame is one thing, but there are people who haven't been born today who will be going to that stadium in 20 years plus. So how do you sort of future-proof such a massive investment like this with an understanding or an anticipation of how society and how people will behave in the future and what will motivate them?
A lot of it is about infrastructure backbones and allowing, as Sanjeev says, a resilience. So creating a structure and a network which allows the IT systems to adapt to whatever's going to come in the future. I think there's some interesting discussions around the world of how you genuinely integrate fans in South Korea to the live experience. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about virtual reality, off-site Spurs, bars, restaurants, small stadiums,
supporters clubs. Your virtual stadium, I think, is where the growth is obviously going to be. I think I was reading something in one of the many publications that this was the year of VR. I don't think it's the year of VR here. It might be the year of VR in the US. We're just not ready. We don't have many stadiums that even have Wi-Fi, right? Yeah. So I think we know that we're going to have those, I would say, infrastructure foundations. But you're right, looking 20 years down the line is a long time. But one thing we do know is that the stadium has been designed in a way to allow for, I would call it the core infrastructure to be flexible. So we know that technology has a refresh cycle. Your core switches, your various other bits and pieces will change every few years. And we know we've got the spaces. That's the key thing as well. You need to have the spaces to put your stuff in. And we've got lots of those in the new stadium.
Time for one last question.
Yeah, Toby Hester, ESSA. I asked a question yesterday when we were talking about globalisation of sport. The age profile of football is changing. It's getting older and older. When I was a kid at Southampton, when it was black and white, there used to be a box for under 14-year-olds to go into that were just young kids, and you're allowed to go in there for pennies. It was, even in those days, it was a fraction of the normal ticket price. Globalisation is forcing audiences or allowing audiences into our sport, especially Premier League and your team, from Asia, Africa, the States, etc., etc. Fantastic from a commercial perspective. But as Barry Hearn said yesterday, it starts at home with your audience. And if you don't have your audience right, you don't have an atmosphere, you lose the atmosphere, you lose the draw to the outside world. What are you guys doing in terms of offering concessions to young people, students? and other families in specific areas of your stadium in this plan?
I mean, the one thing that I can say, I mean, obviously there's a lot of discussions internally about that, as you can imagine. And going back to the first slide that Chris put up is the community slide. So obviously, as part of building the stadium in Tottenham, there is that community aspect to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of things we're looking at. Certainly there are family-specific areas. We're looking at youth areas. We're currently looking at a creche within the stadium where you could come and drop your kids before whilst you
Is
go
that for
through
the players?
The players have their own. But for fans. So the idea is, I mean, genuinely, everyone's very aware that, you know, the EPL average age is getting older, and if we don't get the 8, 9, 10-year-olds into supporting our clubs, they'll go and support someone else. So there's a big focus on growing that junior fan base.
And this is the reason why it needs to be technically really advanced, because they're all coming in with their devices and they want to, and it's the same experience they have at home. They'll watch football at home or any sport at home, and they're also on this, doing whatever they do with their thumbs, right? That's what they're doing. When they get to the venue, they expect to do something similar. But we can't, we want to make sure that the atmosphere at White Hart Lane is still incredible. And that's really important. We don't want the devices to change that. You know, there's clubs in Europe who switch off their Wi-Fi when the game happens. You know, the technology allows you to do that. You know, and that's the key thing.
We wanted to augment the atmosphere rather than replace it.
Exactly.
Very much our driver.
Christopher Lee of Populous and Sanjeev Katwa of Tottenham Hotspur, thank you very much. That was fascinating. I can't wait to go. It's going to be brilliant. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much.